If there was ever a moment powerful enough to rip apart a child's inner world in less than 5 minutes, it was that evening. I still remember the dim yellow light of the living room, like the pale skin of someone on their deathbed, and the faces of my parents. So calm, they were cold. When they uttered 3 simple words: "We're getting divorced." No tears, no yelling. Just a suffocating silence, like I'd just been told I'd be exiled to another planet forever. I was 12 years old, and that night my childhood was officially buried beneath the tiled floor. They told me everything would be okay, but they never had to live in the chaos they created. I did. My mother, Evelyn, sat cross-legged on the sofa, gripping her favorite ceramic mug like she was about to announce a store-wide sale. My father, George, sat at the other end, head down, fidgeting with his shoelaces. Between them was a distance I had never noticed. Until that night. "Leela, your mom and I want to talk to you for a moment." Her voice was light as air but cold as ice. I knew something was wrong. She had called me downstairs with no music playing, no snacks on the table, no signs this was a normal conversation. I sat down, my hands were freezing. Dad looked up and gave a strained smile. "We're getting divorced." Those 3 words dropped like a hammer. Neither of them looked me in the eye. I turned to Mom, waiting for her to object, or at least shake her head. But she only nodded slightly. I didn't understand. They didn't fight. There were no screaming matches. No dramatic dish throwing like in movies. They were just strangers. "Why?" I asked, as a survival reflex. "Because sometimes, adults no longer walk the same path," Mom replied like I was a kindergartner. "Mom has a new boyfriend and Dad already met someone too," Dad added, like he was talking about changing lunch orders. I sat there, heart crushed into a metal box with no exit. Boyfriend, girlfriend, they hadn't said anything to me. They had planned, decided, built new lives. And I was the last to know. Dad said I'd be living with Mom but would visit him on weekends. Mom said I'd soon meet her new friend Kevin and his twin daughters. "They're your age, Lila, you'll have someone to play with," she said, like I needed new dolls to make up for what was gone. I jumped up, the chair toppled back, and I screamed. "I don't want new friends, I want my parents." I ran upstairs, slammed the door, and cried until my throat burned. I thought if I cried hard enough, loud enough, they'd change their minds. But my parents stayed downstairs, chatting quietly like 2 coworkers wrapping up a business deal. Less than a month later, Dad moved out. I never saw him pack. Everything disappeared on a Monday morning. I came home from school and his room was empty, like he'd never been there. Mom was different. She didn't hide anything. Kevin moved in the following week. His daughters, Clara and Beth, came along like living Barbie dolls. I tried. The moment they stepped into the house, I welcomed them. "Hi, I'm Lila. I can show you the rooms." Clara, the taller one, blonde ponytail, looked me up and down. "No need," she snapped. Beth, the other twin, added, "We don't need a big sister." Big sister. That word felt like a slap. I never asked to be anyone's sister. I never wanted to share my mom. The following days were a string of shocks. My clothes were suddenly borrowed without permission. My belongings disappeared without a trace. Mom laughed and said, "Lila, you need to learn to share, they're new here." I didn't argue. I just quietly kept a mental list of every item that vanished. When my 13th birthday came, I thought at least Mom would remember. But that morning she said in passing, "The girls have a swim meet today, I need to take them early. We'll do your birthday tomorrow, okay?" Tomorrow? There never was a tomorrow. Cake, presents, wishes, all swallowed by new friends, stepsisters, and Mom's new man. I looked in the bathroom mirror, trying to see the girl who used to smile every time Dad told bedtime stories. No one told stories anymore. Just me. Lost, replaced, and forced to adapt to things I never chose. But I knew. This was only the beginning. If anyone ever asked me, "When did you stop feeling like your mother's daughter?" I'd say the afternoon I was kicked out of my bedroom because Beth didn't like the bedsheet color. I walked in after school, backpack still on, to see Clara spraying my room with Mom's perfume. Beth sat on my bed, bouncing her feet against the pillows like she was kicking me out of my own world. "This room is disgustingly small," Beth declared, like an interior design critic. "You should move to the basement. Mom says it's cooler and quieter down there." Clara sneered, her eyes daring me to argue. I turned to Mom, standing right at the doorway. I waited for her to say, "Don't be ridiculous, this is Lila's room." But she didn't. She glanced at me and looked away. "You can sleep in the storage room, Lila, just for now until they get settled." Just for now? I slept in that basement for 6 months. Every night, listening to the leaking pipes, dripped like a countdown to my disappearance. I wasn't called big sister or daughter of the house. I was the extra. One afternoon I came home and saw Beth wearing my purple hoodie, the last birthday gift Mom ever gave me when I turned 10. "That's my hoodie," I said, trying to keep calm. Beth smirked. "Mom said if it fits me I can have it." I turned to Mom, who was stirring vegetables on the stove. "Mom, that's mine." "Drop it, Lila, your sister needs to feel welcome, don't be so selfish." I was speechless. Days later, I found all 3 of my journals torn apart, pages scattered in the trash. Someone had read them, destroyed them. No one got punished. I never wrote again. It didn't stop at Mom's house. Every other weekend, I still had to visit Dad. At the small beige house in the suburbs of Madison, where he lived with his new wife Louise and her teenage son Grady. Grady was 2 years older and sly like a fox, disguised as a teenager. I thought maybe I'd have a quiet space there. But the first night killed that hope. That night, while I was sleeping, I suddenly felt something crawl across my face. I screamed before I even opened my eyes. When the light flipped on, there was a huge fake spider sitting on my pillow. Grady stood at the door, phone in hand, recording my panic. She freaked out like a wet kitten, he laughed and ran off. I ran down the stairs, tears spilling, my heart still pounding. Louise came out from the kitchen, one hand on her hip. "What's all the yelling in the middle of the night?" "Grady put a fake spider on my pillow, I was scared." "Oh, for heaven's sake, it was just a joke, kids being kids." "Do you really need to make such a fuss?" she snapped. I turned to my dad, hoping he would defend me. But he only sighed. "Louise is right, you need to learn how to control your emotions." I stood frozen between 2 adults who didn't even ask if I was okay. The following week things reached a breaking point. I came home from school and found 3 of my hand-drawn art pieces, ones I had been preparing to submit to my art class, ripped apart. I rushed to Grady's room and banged on the door. "Open up, I know you did it." Louise heard the yelling and dragged me downstairs. "That's enough, you think this is your house? Yelling at my son like that." I broke into tears. "He tore my drawings, I spent a whole week working on them." "Lila, go to your room," my dad shouted, the first time he ever raised his voice at me. But I wasn't sent to my room. Louise pulled me into the old storage room next to the garage. A damp space with cracked walls and a moldy stench. "Sit here until you learn how to behave." She slammed the door shut. I was locked in there for almost 3 hours, no light, no voices. All I could hear were the cars passing by outside and Grady's giggles echoing from upstairs. After that night, I barely spoke to anyone. I became a shadow in both houses, forgotten, ignored. At my mom's house, I was the bother. At my dad's, I was the troublemaker. I tried to tell my homeroom teacher, but my mom came to the school, smiled sweetly, and said, I had an active imagination, that I was just sensitive from the adjustment. I watched her sign the report with that fake smile only I knew the truth behind. I started skipping school, pretending to be sick, looking for any excuse to avoid going home. I stayed in the library until closing just to delay going back to the safe place everyone else imagined I had. One day, while I was sitting quietly at the park, a familiar voice called out, "Leela, "What are you doing here all alone?" I turned around. It was Aunt Margot, my father's sister. Someone I'd never spoken to for more than 10 minutes. I burst into tears, unable to hold it in. I didn't know that moment, standing in an empty playground in her unexpected embrace, would be the first door opening to something I had never dared dream of. A real family. I don't remember how long I cried on her shoulder. My whole body collapsed, every emotion I'd bottled up over the past year. Shame, anger, the fear of being forgotten, burst out like a dam breaking. She didn't ask questions. She just held me tightly, her hand gently rubbing my back with a tenderness I hadn't felt from my birth mother in so long. That same day I was taken to her home. Aunt Margot's house, or as I came to call it later, Aunt Sarah's house, was a small 2-story home on the edge of Racine, Wisconsin. Not fancy, not spacious, but from the moment I stepped in, I felt peace. Something neither of the other 2 houses ever gave me. Uncle Tom, Aunt Sarah's husband, was an orthopedic doctor. He was tall, serious-looking, but when he saw the state I was in, he simply smiled and asked gently, "Lila, do you like pizza or spaghetti? Tonight we're making whatever you choose." I froze. No one had ever asked me what I wanted to eat. At Mom's house we ate whatever she liked. At Dad's, I wasn't even invited to the table. That night, we made homemade pizza. Aunt Sarah let me pick the cheese and even wrote my name on one slice using tomato sauce. I laughed, a real laugh, after what felt like months. From that one dinner, I started finding reasons to stay at their place longer. I told them Mom was on a business trip, then said Dad was busy over the weekend. I made up stories about tutoring nearby, school holidays. Anything to avoid going back to the place where I felt invisible. Aunt Sarah knew. Uncle Tom knew too. But they didn't ask. They simply set up a room for me, bought an extra blanket, a desk, and a nightlight shaped like a fox. Because I'd once told them I loved foxes, as a kid. I didn't have to tiptoe. Didn't have to watch the clock to turn the lights off. Didn't have to quietly eat leftovers alone. I got to live. I started doing better in school. When teachers called home, no one snapped at me for interrupting during dinner prep. Aunt Sarah answered, took notes, even scheduled meetings with my teachers. Grandma Margot, Uncle Tom's mother, lived nearby. She was retired but still very active. She often took me on evening walks, telling me stories from her days as an EMT nurse. "You know, once I stitched a wound during a hailstorm," she said. "Really? Didn't it hurt?" It did. But my patient was hurting more. So I braced myself, just like you are now. I asked her, "Do you think I can be strong like you?" She smiled and said, "Sweetheart, you're already stronger than I ever was at 12. Time passed, and I slowly became part of their home, not loudly, but fully. I learned to fold my own laundry, helped cook on weekends, and washed the car with Uncle Tom. No one made me, no one ordered me. I did it because I wanted to. But then, what had to happen, happened. One Tuesday afternoon, Miss Rodriguez, my homeroom teacher, visited my mother's house as part of a routine school check. I wasn't there. When asked, my mother said, "Lila's with her father this week." Ms. Rodriguez frowned. She had just spoken to my father that morning, and he had said I was living with my mother. The situation was immediately reported to Child Protective Services. 3 days later, I was called into the principal's office. A social worker was waiting. I thought I'd be scolded for running away, but they didn't blame me. Family court was scheduled 1 week later. I sat in a cold courtroom, my biological parents on opposite sides. Neither of them dared to look me in the eye. "I can't take her in," my father said first, voice dry. "My wife is about to give birth. We don't have the space." My mother scoffed. "I work. I have 2 young daughters. I can't deal with Lila's issues on top of that." Issues. I, their daughter, was an issue. I clenched my fists, forcing back tears. But then, Aunt Sarah stood up, her voice rang clear in the tense room. Your Honor, I'm the sister of George, Lila's biological father. My husband is a doctor. I'm a middle school teacher. We're fully capable of raising Lila. Uncle Tom stood beside her, nodding. We don't have children, but if allowed, we would love for Lila to be our daughter. I turned to look at them. Their faces weren't afraid, they weren't hiding, they weren't calculating. Only love. The judge looked at me. Lila, you're old enough to state your preference. Who would you like to live with? I stood up, heart pounding like a war drum. I want to live with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom. They're my real family. I looked over at my mom and dad. Neither of them said a word. They let out a sigh, as if they had finally let go of a heavy burden. After the hearing, I was issued a new birth certificate. My name was now officially listed in Aunt Sarah's household. From that moment on, I was no longer the child torn between two houses where no one truly wanted me. I had a home. I had people who called me their daughter. Their Lila. On the first night I officially became Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom's daughter, I sat at the dinner table and nervously asked, "Can I call you Mom and Dad?" Aunt Sarah burst into tears. Uncle Tom pulled me into a hug. We've been waiting to hear that for a long time. And just like that, for the first time after 2 years of hell, I was born again. Into a family that wasn't perfect, but was real. But I had no idea that this peace was only the calm before the biggest storm of my life. There's something strange that happens when you finally get to live in a real home. You start believing you deserve to be happy. And then, little by little, you begin becoming a version of yourself you never thought you could be. After being legally adopted by Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom, everything in my life began to shift. No more restless nights filled with shouting. No more awkward silent meals. No more suspicious stares waiting for me to mess up. I woke up each morning to the smell of baked goods Aunt Sarah made, and fell asleep after hearing Uncle Tom tell stories about surgeries he'd performed. I was no longer the outcast in someone else's home. I was Lila, their daughter. Grandma Margot, Uncle Tom's mother, now my grandma, became more important than I could have imagined. She came over every Wednesday afternoon, bringing old medical books and a bag of oatmeal raisin cookies. "I want you to try reading the first few chapters of this," she said, handing me a thick copy of Basic Anatomy. I was surprised. "You think I'll understand it?" She smiled. "I believe you won't just understand, it'll come naturally to you." And she was right. I became captivated by the detailed descriptions of the circulatory system, the way the heart functions, the different types of muscle tissues. What once seemed dry and boring suddenly came alive in my mind. I realized I wasn't just interested because Grandma liked it, but because I truly found medicine fascinating. I began excelling in school. From a child once labeled problematic at my old school, I became a top student 3 years in a row at Northridge High School. Aunt Sarah helped me set up a study plan and pinned it beside my desk. Uncle Tom bought me a miniature anatomical model to study anatomy. Every A I earned was celebrated with fresh baked chocolate cookies and a family movie night. No one forced me to study, they simply believed in me. And that belief made me want to try twice as hard. At 15 years old, I was chosen to represent my school in the state biology competition. I stood on stage, hands trembling like leaves, but when the spotlight hit me, I thought of only one thing. Grandma was sitting in the front row, and I wanted her to be proud. I won first place. My photo holding the trophy was printed in the school newsletter, and for the first time, I saw my name on the honor roll. That night, as we celebrated with ice cream, Uncle Tom asked, "Lila, have you ever thought about what you want to be when you grow up?" I didn't hesitate. "I want to be a doctor, like you, and like Grandma." No one laughed. No one said, "That's too hard." No one asked, "Who do you think you are to dream that big?" Aunt Sarah simply nodded, her eyes slightly wet. "Then let's make that dream come true, together." I threw myself into my studies. Up early to review, late nights practicing problems, weekends interning at a small hospital Uncle Tom recommended. Every step, someone walked with me. Grandma spent hours telling me about her toughest shifts back in the day. She told me not every patient would make it, but we had to give them the strength to believe they could. I wrote that down in my journal. It's not just about saving lives, it's about keeping the patient's hope alive. When college application season came, I sat with Aunt Sarah to fill out every line. We sent my application to the University of Minnesota pre-med program, the school I had dreamed of since ninth grade. Waiting for the results was a stretch of anxiety-filled weeks. I grew quieter. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, afraid I wouldn't be good enough. "What if I don't get in?" I asked Aunt Sarah one night. She held my hand. "Then you'll apply again. And if not that, we'll find another path. You are not defined by a college gate, Lila. You're defined by your courage." The acceptance letter came on a rainy April afternoon. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Bold letters read, "Congratulations, you've been admitted to the University of Minnesota pre-med program with a full scholarship." I screamed. I cried. I hugged everyone tightly. Grandma gently touched my cheek, smiling proudly. I knew it, my granddaughter was born to do great things. That fall, I left for college. I didn't carry much luggage, but my heart was heavy. It was the first time I was leaving the home that had saved my life. Before I boarded the train, Grandma gave me a small wooden box. Inside was a black and white photo of her standing outside her old hospital in 1956. "Take this with you. Whenever you're tired, look at it and remember, you're continuing a dream." I nodded, tears in my eyes. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wouldn't be walking it alone. I was Lila, the daughter of Sarah and Tom, the granddaughter of Margot. And I was on my way to becoming a doctor, not just to heal others, but to heal myself. When you're in the most defining years of your life, those years that are supposed to be filled with hope and a bright future, life still has its ways of breaking you all over again. In the fall of my junior year of college, I got that call. The kind of call I thought would be routine, Grandma checking in on my classes. But it wasn't. "Leela, you need to come to the hospital. Grandma Sarah, she didn't make it." Aunt Sarah's voice cracked like a snapped string. Just those words, and my whole world shattered instantly. I couldn't believe it. Grandma, the one person who had always been there for me, who had constantly taught me about love and the power of resilience, was gone. I couldn't picture life without her. I left my dorm room, rushing across campus, not even thinking about what I could lose. When I got to the hospital, Aunt Sarah was sitting beside the hospital bed, holding Grandma's hand. My Grandma Margot had passed in her sleep, peacefully and gently. But to me her death felt like a tsunami, washing away everything I had fought so hard to build. "She will always be the one I look up to," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Aunt Sarah said nothing. She just nodded and held me tightly. There was nothing more to say. It was the biggest heartbreak of my life. Grandma, who had stood by me through the hardest days, was gone. Every morning she used to wake me up early and make me a simple, nourishing breakfast. She taught me how to be a doctor, not through textbooks, but through compassion and love. Now she was gone, and I had to keep living without her. At her funeral, in the thick silence of loss, I was given a letter she had written for me. When everyone had left the room, I stayed behind, alone in her quiet space. I opened the letter. My chest tightened as I read each word she had left me. "My dearest Lila, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm no longer with you. I've always known you'd go where your heart leads, and I'm proud of how strong you've become. But there's something important I need you to know. I'm leaving you everything I have. An estate worth nearly $2 million. You don't have to worry about your future anymore. Use it to build your life. But don't forget what I taught you about using your strength to help others. I believe in you." I couldn't breathe. $2 million. An enormous amount of money. She hadn't just left me with endless love. She had given me the chance to pursue my dreams without worrying about finances. But I also understood. This wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility she entrusted to me. She didn't just want me to become a doctor. She wanted me to be someone who could change the lives of those who needed help. After the funeral, Aunt Sarah called me into her home office, where she often worked on lesson plans. "Lila, you may need time to process all this, but we need to talk about what to do with the money." I sat silently, unable to speak. Everything was too sudden, and I didn't know where to begin. Aunt Sarah gently continued, "You didn't just inherit Grandma's assets, you inherited part of her mission. You can't just think about yourself." I looked at her, eyes swollen from crying, but there was a steadiness in my gaze I had never noticed before. "I understand, Auntie. I'll follow what Grandma taught me. I won't live only for myself." Aunt Sarah smiled and gave my hand a soft pat. "Grandma would be proud of you, Lila. Now, you have everything you need to move forward. Don't forget, we're always here." With the inheritance from Grandma, I decided not only to continue my education but also to launch charitable projects to help low-income patients, people who couldn't afford medical treatment. To make that possible, I founded a nonprofit in Grandma Margot's name, the Margot Community Health Fund. Every time I look at her photo on my desk, I remember her words. "Use your talents and your resources to help those around you." And I know this is the path she wanted for me. Each day I felt myself growing, not just as a medical student, but as someone who carried responsibility for others. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom supported me every step of the way, but I knew I couldn't have done any of this without Grandma's love and guidance. She may have passed, but what she left in me, love, resilience and duty, would stay with me forever. And I will never forget that she gave me more than a family, she gave me a purpose. Because I had spent so long in the shadows of emotional neglect, I didn't easily recognize the subtle signs when people entered your life only when they needed something. But this time, I did. It all started with a phone call on a Saturday morning as I sat in the office of my nonprofit preparing documents for a new project. "Hi sweetie, Lila, how have you been?" It was my mother's voice on the line, soft and gentle, as if nothing had happened over the past decade. I didn't know what to say. It had been so long since I heard her voice, and honestly I hadn't expected this call. "Mom, it's been a while. Is everything okay?" I asked, cautiously. "Well," she said, "Bob and I are having a little financial trouble. His business is struggling, and I thought maybe if you could help us a bit, just temporarily. You understand, right? We're family after all." I froze. Family? I had severed ties long ago, and now she was using that word to lure me back in. "Mom, I think you can find help somewhere else, can't you? I've told you before, I'm busy with work and the foundation." There was a pause, then her voice returned, slightly firmer. "I just hoped you'd understand. I'm still your mother, and if family doesn't help each other, who will?" What I felt was a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I get it, Mom, but you have to understand. I can't help again. I have my own work, and I won't be used anymore." She didn't respond immediately. After a few seconds of silence she spoke softly, like trying to appeal to me. "Well, it's fine, if you won't help. But I do hope we can at least meet. Maybe if we talk in person, you'll understand what I'm going through." Those words hit me hard. I realized then, this wasn't the first time my mother had tried to guilt me into helping her. Just as I suspected, her real motive wasn't family, it was money. I hung up, saying nothing more, but my heart felt heavy. The next morning, I got another call, this time from my father. At first his voice sounded concerned, like when I was little and he wanted me to come home for the weekend. But this time, I could tell something was off. "Lila, how are you? Susan and I, well, we've been having some financial difficulties. I didn't want to bother you, but I figured you'd understand. We're family, right?" Again, the word family came up, but this time I was too tired to listen to the polished words. "Dad, what do you want?" I interrupted. I couldn't pretend not to understand his intentions anymore. "You know, Susan and I are struggling. I know we haven't talked much since you moved away, but if you could help us just a little, I'd never forget it." I felt like a wave was rising inside me. Never in my life had he spoken to me like this. "Oh, I don't understand why you think I can help. I'm no longer a child who needs your care. I have my own life. You should be able to manage yours." His voice started to break, as if he didn't expect me to say no. "Lila, I just hope you remember I did everything for you when you were young. We're family. We help each other. Can't you see that?" His words felt like a plea in the dark. But I wasn't that naive child anymore. "You want help because you're in trouble, but I won't be used like before. I'm not helping you anymore." I hung up firmly. After that call, I felt nothing but weariness. My parents only showed up when they needed money. But this time, I had learned how to protect myself. A few days later, I went to Aunt Sarah's house. Not for advice, but to let it out. She wasn't surprised when I told her about the calls. She just nodded quietly, looking at me with eyes that understood everything. "You know, Lila," she said, "real family are the ones who are there when you need them, not the ones who only show up when they want something." I nodded. Aunt Sarah was right. Whether or not my biological parents ever returned to me, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Tom, and Grandma had always been my real family. The ones who never used me. The ones I could trust. "I won't let them use me again, Auntie. I don't need them to feel like I matter." Aunt Sarah smiled and gently patted my shoulder. "That's good. You deserve a life that's peaceful and free." My heart felt lighter than ever. I had realized that family means love and care, not people who see you as an opportunity. And I wasn't the weak little girl they once used as an excuse to manipulate. They thought one call, one suggestion, would make me return like a puppet, following their orders. But this time, I knew I had to stand my ground. The first call came from my mother. After I refused her previous requests for financial help, she kept texting and calling, trying to soften my rejection, but I didn't budge. "Lila, I really need you. We're family. You can't let me and Bob end up like this." Her voice trembled, like she was trying to stage an emotional performance. I listened, but I didn't feel even a sliver of sympathy. I was too tired of her lies, of her emotional manipulation. She had abandoned me for years, and now she was coming back. Only because she needed money. "You think I can help you like I used to, but I'm not your little girl anymore. You and Bob can figure things out yourselves. You don't need to lean on me." My voice was firm, unwavering. She went silent for a moment, then continued, as if she couldn't accept the rejection. "Lila, I did everything for you. Just help me this one time and I won't ask for anything else. Can't you do that for me?" Her voice was almost pleading, but I didn't hear truth in it. Every word felt like it was slicing into old memories. Memories of years I was abandoned. Of trying so hard to please her without ever receiving real care in return. "You weren't there when I needed you most. Now you don't get to ask for my help. I have my real family now, and Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom are my legal parents." My words were cold, like a knife. But I knew I had to say them. This wasn't revenge, it was release. I didn't need to keep living in the shadow of the past, in the shadow of people who had left me behind. I hung up without hesitation, and after that I never received another call from her. Then my dad called. This time, I didn't give myself a chance to feel vulnerable. The moment I heard his voice, I already knew what the conversation would be. "Hey, Lila, I need your help. I heard about the inheritance and I figured you wouldn't let me and Susan struggle, would you?" I wasn't surprised. I had been waiting for this call. After they found out I had money, he and my stepmom were bound to come back, like wild monkeys returning for what they wanted. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. "You need money, don't you?" I asked flatly, my tone emotionless. "You know, I don't want to bother you, but I'm having a hard time." Once again he was trying to pull at my sympathy, but I knew this game far too well. "You want me to help because you're struggling? I've heard enough." I cut in, my voice like a wall he couldn't pass through. "I'm not a child you can take advantage of. I'm not your little girl anymore. If you need help, You need to help yourself. I'm not your financial backup plan." I could hear the shock in his voice, but I didn't give him room to argue. "You'll have to find another way, because I will never be the easy option again. I'm not a child in your house anymore." I hung up, and a strange sense of peace washed over me. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the need to explain. This was my choice. And it was the right one. But it didn't end there. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. From my mother. Inside were threats that she would take legal action if I didn't help her and my father. She wrote that I had an obligation to the family, that she would take me to court for failing to uphold my responsibilities and denying her rights. I read the words and felt nothing but emptiness. The only emotion left in me was exhaustion. "I'm not your daughter anymore. I don't owe you for your decisions. If you want to sue me, go ahead, but I will never come back." I wasn't afraid. I wasn't scared of threats. My mother and father had failed to protect me when I needed them most, and now they wanted to use me for money? I didn't have to put up with this manipulation anymore. I mailed the letter back, stating that I had cut off all contact with both of them and wanted no involvement in any dispute. That was my final decision. In that moment, I felt like I had made a pivotal turn in my life. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom were my true family. They never asked for anything from me, but they were always there when I needed them. That is what real family looks like. I knew I couldn't change the past. But I could choose my future, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my parents, destroy that. Life isn't always easy, but after everything, I've learned that the most important thing is choosing who walks beside you, the people who love you, not the ones who use you. One autumn day, while I was sitting in my office at the foundation preparing for a new project, my phone buzzed again. I didn't think much of it. Unwelcome calls had become part of my routine. But this time, it was a familiar number. Jake, my half-brother. The story between us had gone unresolved for too long. Jake was someone I used to hate, but now, hearing his voice on the phone, I sensed something had changed. "Lila, do you still remember me?" Jake began, his voice soft. I paused for a moment. The feeling was hard to explain. I didn't know where to start. "Jake, why are you calling me?" I asked, still guarded. I want to apologize for everything in the past. All those years, I didn't understand how much I hurt you. I'm truly sorry. I've changed, Lila. I'm not the same naive kid anymore." A flood of emotions rose in me. Unexplainable, overwhelming. I could feel sincerity in his words, and for a brief moment, a part of me wanted to forgive, even if the past wasn't easy to forget. "I don't think I can forget everything, but you showed me something different. I can't go back, but maybe we can start over. As friends. Is that okay?" Jake was silent for a moment, then he let out a quiet laugh. "I won't let you down again. Thank you for giving me this chance." After that call, I felt a shift inside me. I didn't need to hold on to the anger forever. Jake had grown up, and I was no longer the fragile girl I once was. I'd learned that sometimes all it takes is enough courage to let go of the past, and you can start again, even with someone you once despised. A few months later, Jake and I started seeing each other regularly. We grabbed coffee, talked about old memories, and everything that had happened over the years. I began to see him as a real friend, and the distance I once felt started to fade. But then, one day, I got a message from Jake. "Lila, there's something I need to talk to you about. Can we meet?" I felt something wasn't quite right, but I agreed to see him. When I arrived at the cafe, Jake was already sitting there, looking a bit nervous. "Lila, I want to ask you something. Can you help Lily?" I blinked. "Lily? Our little sister?" Jake nodded, his face troubled. "She's struggling in school. No one in the family is helping her, and I think if you helped her, maybe she'd get a real chance to change her life." My heart sank. I remembered what it was like to fight alone, to feel abandoned. And I didn't want Lily to go through that. But part of me still hesitated. Jake, I don't want to get pulled back into the problems of our old family, I said, feeling like my heart was torn in two. Jake looked at me, his eyes full of sincerity. I understand, Lila. I don't want you to carry any more pain. But she's not like us. She's not a troubled kid, and she doesn't have anyone to help her. I'm just asking you to do one good thing. I looked into his eyes. And then, I realized, it wasn't because I owed anything to the adults from our past. It was because I could help Lily avoid the mistakes I had once paid for. All right? I'll help Lily, I said, my voice steady. Jake smiled, his eyes lighting up. Thank you, Lila, I knew you'd do the right thing. From that day on, I began helping Lily by setting up a small scholarship fund just for her. This fund would support her education, give her access to better opportunities, and I hoped it would give her a real chance to change her future, to step out of the shadow of the past. I knew this wasn't full forgiveness, and I still kept my distance from my mother and father. I didn't want to be dragged back into their calculating lives. But I also knew I couldn't let Lily go through what I had. Even if I couldn't be her family, I could be a good friend. And so, I continued building my life with the people who truly cared for and loved me. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom continued to be my support system at every step. I no longer felt alone. I knew that, even though I had been hurt so deeply in the past, I could still take control of my life and live according to the values I believed in. No one could break me anymore. And more importantly, I had learned how to choose kindness, but only for those who deserved it. Lila's story is a journey of overcoming pain and rebuilding a life from the shattered pieces of the past. From a girl abandoned by her family, she learned to stand tall, to choose kindness for the right people, and to use her strength to build a better future. Lila not only rediscovered her self-worth, but also inspired others by helping those less fortunate, proving that love and resilience can transform lives. How do you feel about Lila's journey and her brave decisions? Share your thoughts on this story or the character, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss the next powerful stories about life and family.